also present. And with that, we do have a quorum, and then we'll move on to item C, which is approval of the minutes from our last meeting, which was February 22nd. And if I can entertain a motion and a second for approval of those minutes, if you've had a chance to review them and see that everything is clear and correct as it was presented.
I'll move that we approve the minutes as presented.
Motion by Mr. Mitchell-Patin. And do I get a second, please?
Second.
And a second by Mr. Ken Parsons. And with that, we'll move to item D, which is a public comment. And if there's any person wishing to address the advisory council, please complete your public comment form and submit it to the program specialist. But we see no one, so we will move to item E. And we are clipping along here pretty well. And I want to be mindful, we're going to probably have some comments and fodder during our rules. So I want to provide ample time for discussion for that. So with that, we'll move to item E, which is the staff reports. And the first one is licensing division, statistics.
Good morning. Tarsha Red, Manager in Licensing Division. I look like I'm part of the saddest country song ever written, but I'm not. It's just allergies. So,
Me too.
pardon the red eyes.
We all feel your pain.
As you can see from the report that I've given you all this morning, I gave you a much more detailed report in the packet, so this was a lot easier to read. With senior property tax consultants, we had a slight increase since our last fiscal year to a total population of 738, as well as our property tax consultants to 1,059. Real estate consultants have remained the same, and overall there's been an increase of to about 1,800 licensees.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
A real estate property tax consultant is, or could you just, what is that?
Yeah.
It's, it is, but it's a license that was kind of grandfathered in. We don't actually issue it anymore. But those licensees have maintained their license over the years.
Oh, I mean, is it just confined to realtors and appraisers?
Mary Winston, I'm only interrupting Tarsha because I also, I previously worked at the Real Estate Commission. So that is a license that is strictly for brokers.
Right.
They would do a limited assessment, but they're stuck at the limited assessment because they don't have that license. But this is one that they could attain, a registration, so to speak, to be able to give a more in-depth assessment. And we don't grant that anymore, but some of them still hold on to it.
So originally when they wrote it, I think, I'm just gonna call it realtors, were allowed to do everything up to like an 8-plex or something like that.
Yes, yes.
And you're saying that that's gone away?
That has gone away.
Let me ask another question. A lot of people were grandfathered in, and people that have a designation called CMI. So do the numbers that you present today include those people? In other words, is the total number of people in the property tax business ballpark 1813?
Wait a minute, say that question again?
Okay. Y'all, I might be asking a stupid question.
No, not at all.
I'm going to take one category. There's a category with a CMI designation. Okay. And those people don't have to take the senior or anything. Is that still the case?
Just as the attorneys. So that's
So they're
right,
just like
kind of,
attorneys,
yes.
but they have to do continuing ed.
Right.
Right.
Are they in these numbers?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Well, you answered
It's
my
all
question.
inclusive.
But it's only the attorneys, correct?
No, she said CMI and attorney is basically the same thing.
Every licensee, even though, like with the real estate property tax consultants, even though we don't issue new licenses for that particular license type, it's still included in the total count.
And your function is?
Oh, I'm an attorney.
Can I make a comment about that?
Yes.
You know, I was there, and Mr. Parsons down there was there when this was originally created. But, and I have people who work for me who have that CMI designation, and I will tell you for a fact, it's an extraordinarily hard examination that they have to take. But in all of their education, there's not one word about Texas property tax code. Not one word about Texas administrative remedy, not one. And so we've let all these people into the system, and I mean, if it's all about protecting the public, these guys get no training. You might say they get training because they go to seminars and get their credits every year, but I'm telling you that it's a great designation. It's a national, it was always designed to be a national designation. And they do a very extraordinary job of training them on appraisal and stuff. They get zero education on Texas, zero. So,
Paul, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So, if you're designated as a CMI through the IPT,
yeah.
then you don't have to get a
You're like a lawyer.
consulting license
You're like
in
a
order
lawyer.
to practice property tax consulting in Texas?
They issue a license, I believe.
You're exempt from the exam.
But
I
you're
believe.
exempt from the education and the exams.
So they get a
But not the
PTC
CEUs,
license?
but not the CEUs.
You have to do continuing ed, which means attend a conference.
Well, that's also where they get all of the things that are related to Texas with the ethics and the property tax law, all the things that we have to have to continue our license.
I'll put it to you like
They,
this.
they don't have to have it going in, apparently, that's what I understood. They don't have to have it going in to get a license, but they have to have it to maintain a license, which does mean that they're taking property tax
Mr.
law,
Mills is a CMI.
ethics,
I
consulting.
have my CMI, and we have to get 60 hours every 5 years. And a good portion of that is ethics. A big portion of that is appraisal. But none of that, 60 hours, is required for Texas. Is to Paul's point.
I'm just.
But do you have to have your 12 to renew your PTC license here in
Yes,
Texas?
yeah, I still have to get there's no reciprocal agreement with IPT on the CEUs. There is.
That's their question. I don't know the answer
Yeah,
to it.
there's reciprocal with IPT, with the CEUs that I get for Texas. I can make that part of my 60 every 5 years. But to what Paul's saying is, within our CMI requirements for 60 hours every 5 years, there is no required Texas. So we get, it is a very difficult designation, but there is no Texas, to Paul's point, for the,
Let me put it a little further. I don't know of another state that does it.
yeah, Tennessee does.
Tennessee?
Yeah,
You're exempt
Tennessee.
from being a licensee?
Yes. And we can actually go before administrative judges in Tennessee. Kentucky, I think.
Well, let's use Colorado. Can't do it in Colorado.
No.
Can't do it in Nevada.
Most states you can.
Yeah, so, the only point I'm trying to raise, and this might be more valid for new business, and I really meant to be here at the last meeting, and I had something come up, but that's something we need to look at. Because the whole thing about TDLR is about protecting the public. And some guy's in Chicago, and he's a CMI or wherever he is, may or may not, probably does not know most of the nuances of this system. And I just think that's something we should look at.
And Mr. Pennington, Mary Winston, again.
Yes, ma'am.
I think you brought up a very good topic, because in all of my, not a ton of years here, but 6 years, and actually when I was a prosecutor in enforcement, this was one of my programs that I did prosecute. Not a highly prosecuted program. You do have some bad actors, but not a huge program as far as TDLR is concerned, licensee body. Pretty good deal. However, this has never been brought up to my knowledge at one of our meetings. So this is something that when we have these meetings internally, you wonderful council members are here and we have our agenda that is we have to put out and post for the public to make sure that we stay on task, and so we're following all of our administrative rules. Behind the scenes, we're a bunch of busy beavers, right? So we are taking things that are discussed here, questions that we couldn't answer because it wasn't on the agenda, and things we have to get back to you for. Thank you, you've given us something to work on. So we need to, sorry to interrupt, but just kind of take a look at this to your perspective, as well as we have CMIs on the council. So this is something that we can definitely look into as we head towards our legislative session, which is coming up in the fall.
Let me give you the equivalency of this. The equivalency would be, you're an MAI, you're an attorney in another state, or whatever, and you're just grandfathered in Texas. That's the equivalency. And it doesn't, and I promote people in my company, it's a big deal, I make them get this designation, but it has nothing to do with Texas. So,
And duly noted, and thank you. We're gonna push back to the reports, and if we want to have something for our next meeting, if we wanna flesh this out for new business, when actually we get to that agenda item,
yeah.
formulate how you want us to look
Okay,
into that,
that's
and we'll
fine.
do that.
Yeah, Paul, let's look at item H, when there's recommendations for the next meeting. We'll
Okay,
just make it
that's
an
fine.
agenda item, and
I'm cool.
you can move that, and I'll second it. So.
Okay, no problem.
Okay. Any additional questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And with that, we'll move to E2, Customer Service Division.
Good morning. Sorry, kind of loud. Good morning, board members. Misty Maldonado de Leon. I am the manager in customer service for this industry. As you can see on the report, we do have minimal contacts from this industry. They're pretty self-sufficient. I do want to also, however, promote, we do email a lot better, and our phone call wait times have been kind of high. So I would like to let the industry know 7 to 8 in the morning. We answer phones from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. 7 to 8 and 5 to 6 are the slowest times for them to call in. But we do promote the emails, gives us time to do research and answer them more diligently. The email address is cs.property.tax.consultants@tdlr.texas.gov.
Is that your
Say that again?
preference?
Yes, cs.property.tax.consultants@tdlr.texas.gov. That's on the website as well.
Misty, is that your preference on how to handle it?
Yes, yeah. It gives us time to do the research and answer
Yeah.
them a little more detailed.
And there's record of it as
Yes, it's in writing. They can also change their contact information on our website, so that's a good thing. And we have an email updates button on their landing page also, so they can sign up for email notifications for upcoming meetings, changes in the laws and rules, things like that, just to stay notified. That's pretty much all I had, if y'all don't have any questions.
Well, it's good to know that we're pretty self-sufficient and we're not high maintenance.
You're a good group of folks.
We don't want to be like those tow truck drivers or anything like that.
Though we love them too. We
Well,
love
that's
all
my
of our
program as well. I
licensees.
won't comment on that.
Disclaimer, yeah.
That was me. That
We
was
love
me
everyone.
speaking.
If you don't have any other questions, that's all I had today.
Thank you, Misty.
Thanks.
And with that, we'll move to E3, Enforcement Division.
Good morning, members. My name is Jessica Hurtado, and I'm a prosecutor in the Enforcement Division. As you can see from the report, we have one case highlight, which was an agreed order in which the respondent agreed to pay a $6,500 penalty and also agreed to a 1-year probated suspension of his license. And that was for performing property tax consulting services for compensation at a time when he was not employed by or associated with a senior property tax consultant. Also, it was found that he had forged the signature of a property owner, and he did not allow the department's investigator to examine and copy records regarding the investigation. The respondent did find a new sponsor, So he does now have a sponsor, and that's why the license was probated suspension and not suspended. Okay, as to the case statistics, there were 16 cases opened for the fiscal year 2018. 5 of those have been resolved. Of those 5, 4 were criminal history cases. 4 other cases were allegations of unlicensed activity. 3 of those have been assigned to a prosecutor, and 1 is still being investigated.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I got 2 cases going, and I get an email once in a while saying it's going, so do I assume that the 3 that you just mentioned, 2 are mine?
Yeah, I mean, we can't comment about any open cases right
can't?
now. Right, but you can certainly get in contact with the attorney that's assigned to the case.
So there's 3 active cases? Did I hear that wrong?
Of the 4 alleging unlicensed activity, 3 are with the prosecutor right now, and 1 has been assigned to an investigator, so they're all active.
So the total number of active cases right now is 5?
No,
No.
I'm
Okay,
sorry.
I didn't understand.
Mary Winston, one more time, and Mr. Pennington, I'm just gonna offer this because Jessica has given the number of alleged unlicensed activity, right?
Yes.
And that was the 4 that remained. So as we are kind of metering down the different allegations, we don't want to do that here. If yours is still open, it's going to be one of the, how many are open, Jessica?
There's 16 total
There's
open.
16 currently. You are
Okay, I'm
not,
sorry.
for
I
public
misunderstood
record.
what she said.
Yes, that is not one of Mr. Pennington's cases specifically. So yes, we're good, but those were for unlicensed activity, not yours.
So in the property tax world, currently, there are 16 open cases.
Yes, sir.
That's all I need.
And any information that you need after the meeting, we'll
Well, that's
definitely
fine.
talk to you.
That's
Oh,
fine.
okay.
I just thought it was 3 or 3.
No.
Right. So out of the remaining, there's 4 other cases that have been assigned to a prosecutor, and there's 3 that are currently with an investigator. And if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Jessica, just a quick question. Of this case that was settled,
Yes.
was that, do you think that was an intentional, or was it just ignorance of the law, in your opinion?
I wasn't the person assigned to the case, so I'm not sure, but I did talk to them, and I think that it may be that it's not clear what is considered supervision.
Mhm.
So there may have been a misunderstanding of what constitutes supervision. And again, I wasn't the one, so I'm not 100% on the facts, but my understanding was that the respondent had someone who they were sort of supervising, but then when it came down to it, said, no, I'm not. So that's
interesting, because we actually had that conversation in our rules discussion in our meeting.
Yep.
If you recall. I think were you there? I think you were. In our rules.
I don't think I was at that
Yep.
particular meeting.
So Jessica, Bill Green, under probated suspension, that would mean the consultant found a new sponsor,
He
senior
did.
sponsor, and he could continue to practice as long as he has no more
Correct.
issues.
His
for
license is
a
still
year,
valid.
2-year period.
Right. For 1 year, he'd be on a suspension, so if there was any other complaint that was, went through the whole resolution and during that time period and was found to be a violation, his license could be suspended at that time.
Right.
But he does have a new sponsor, that was confirmed, and
Right.
so, yeah.
And that case is now public, sorry, this is Deborah Balcom, is that case is now public record?
It's a closed case, so we can discuss it, yes.
Okay.
And Mary Winston, and yes, public record, the agreed orders are public, so it can be looked at via the website or requested if it's not readily available by a public information request.
I have a question as
Sure.
well. Ken Parsons, what is the basis for setting an appeal or determining a suspension when you have a case? Is there a list that you go by and say if they do this, it's this and this, or does it have to do with just, I noticed in here, he would not let somebody look at some documents or what have you. Does that weigh into the amount of the fine or suspension or any of that?
Yes, we do have an enforcement plan, which you can look at on our website, and it basically breaks down all the violations into classes, A, B, C, et cetera, and then each class has a certain penalty amount associated with it. And then within those amounts, the prosecutor has discretion to settle within a certain range.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And I think we've asked maybe for a work group to review that matrix at one
We
point.
did. Paul and
Okay.
Stephen and I are on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other?
This is Mark Ladney, General Counsel. When you're referring to suspension, are you referring to an active suspension or a probated one?
It was probated.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, just a commentary, considering the number of people we have active in our industry, that's not too bad for enforcement division action. Thank you, Jessica. So we'll move to E4, Education and Examination Division.
Good morning, Chairman, council members. My name is John Soldwalker, and I'm representing the Education Examination Division today. Before you are some very well-written, very concise statistics and trends. Feel free to review them and ask me any questions you may have.
John, so right now we only have 4 continuing education providers, is that correct?
Let me check with my mentor, Lorraine.
I know we don't have many.
I think that's right.
I think it's only 4. Mark, you may know.
Oh.
It is 4?
No, it's more than,
Okay.
we currently have 21 CE providers right now for property tax consultant.
CE or initial registration? Sorry, the
For continuing education.
There are
Now,
21.
if you're talking about the pre-license education, there is only 4.
Okay, that's.
Right.
So,
Pre-licensing
That's the one I
education
got.
providers, there's only
Okay.
4.
yes.
And is that pretty common amongst the other, the other license that you have?
Industries and,
Yeah.
you have to consider the fact that for pre-license education in property tax consultants, there is no fee involved. And so, therefore, we don't collect a fee. The review process is not as detailed as it would be if it's an actual application and approval process. 4 is small, but you have to look at the whole population of the industry. And as you've seen through some of our statistics with the other departments, the property tax consultant industry is pretty small. Now, licensing would have to give you the number of how many new applications we have coming in on a regular basis, and we would really want to compare the number of applications that are coming in compared to that for pre-license providers and kind of do a percentage there to give you a better picture of if that's adequate or not.
Yeah, if you just look at total population, it's only gaining maybe 50 or 60 a year, which would make it very thin for a
Right.
provider to.
Yeah, so if you divide that out by the 4, that's a very small number.
Yeah, there's just not enough meat in it unless you do it online or have.
Correct.
No real.
Plus,
operational
there's
cost.
other avenues that new license number that they have of coming in where they don't have to do that 40 hours as well. So you have to look at that too.
Yeah, it'd be a lot of brain damage for a new provider to.
Correct.
This is Deborah Balkum. I have another question too. The pass rate in our examinations is 50%.
Correct.
Is that typical for other industries that have to have an entry exam?
It can be. What you want to look at more than just the percentage, you also want to look at how many people are actually taking that exam. Because if the number goes up, that's going to affect your percentage. If the number goes down as the number of people taking, it's going to affect that highly. If you have 2 people taking the exam and one passes and one doesn't, that's 50%. So that's something you need to take into consideration. This industry, again, has stayed consistent, which that's one thing you want to look at too. If you look at the percentages, they've remained fairly consistent in a full fiscal year period, if you look at that. So it's gone anywhere from 40 to 70%. That's not highly unusual, again, when you look at the number of people taking the exam.
This is Ken Parsons. I know Paul and I have been on the exam committee for a lot of years.
Uh-huh.
And as best I recall, that's been about that 50 to 52 to 54% has been about the pass ratio.
Correct.
Marty? As long back as I can recall that exam being administered. So I think those pass-fail numbers are pretty much the same as they always have been. So.
Ray Pizarro, Director for the Education Examination. Good to see you guys. Lorraine is absolutely correct. Deborah, I want to point out that the pass rate is the pass rate. So it doesn't matter where that bar is. What matters is that the subject matter experts have determined through a job task analysis, these are the things that the minimally competent person needs to know. If everyone passes, that's great. If everyone fails, that's fine as well. But it's just is what it is, and those are attempts of what you're seeing on the numbers. They're not people, as Lorraine is suggesting, they're just attempts. So it could be 2 people taking the exam 20 times. It doesn't necessarily mean, you see where I'm getting at. So just keep that in mind. It's just they're attempts, and the pass rate is the pass rate.
Well, I guess, this is Deborah Baucom again, I guess where I'm coming from on the education side of this is that as somebody who's very involved as one of the primary pre-licensing education providers, I'm chairman of that committee for TAP, and I teach those courses. When the feedback I got back this past year after the last exam review was that entry-level exam was extremely difficult, and the math that they were bringing back to me as examples was
So let me, I'm sorry, let me cut you off right there. I really don't want to talk about the content, and no one should be talking about the content of the exam because the SMEs have taken an oath that anything that happens in that room stays in the room.
Sure.
So I don't think we should be going publicly talking about we're bringing back information to a CE provider.
Right, okay, so.
I just point that out.
Understand. And I wasn't on the exam review, so
Understood.
that wasn't part of my purview. But it seems that it's a very, very difficult exam. And so if our education providers are not providing the proper education, I would wonder how we better expect our education providers to better educate our entry-level folks.
So,
I guess is what I'm saying.
So what we need to understand is we rely on the subject matter expert, and we don't look at an exam whether it's hard or easy. And we've heard this in other industries as well. We have like the electrician examination is like a 40% pass rate. And they're saying, well, it's too hard. Well, we've set the bar that these are the things the minimally competent person needs to know. We've done the same thing here. We're not measuring whether it's hard or easy, the questions, it's whether these are the actual things they need to know.
Right.
And so if those need to change as we go through the years and the job task analysis change, then the SMEs would determine, well, these items are no longer valid. We need to change the questions, and these are the things we need to ask.
Well, then I guess I don't think.
Excuse me. This is Mark Laney, General Counsel. This might be a discussion that we might need to put onto a future agenda item rather than discuss it here. We might be moving a little bit far afield of the agenda item.
And to that point, Ken and Paul, we actually talked about in our rules, if you recall, Mark, about the questions post legislative session, because a lot of the legislation that comes through changes our laws.
That is correct.
So we talked about maybe moving that bar a little bit on doing the reviews at post legislation and changing the exam as well. Wasn't that this
We
do
did
have a
that this
meeting
year.
Every time there is a session, Ms. Kim
Yeah.
Parsons. We do have one, and the professional company that we work with finds all the questions within the database that are affected by that law change, and they put it on the board for us to review, and,
So it's already in
we make
place for the most part?
determinations. Pardon me?
Yes.
So it's already in place? Okay.
Yeah, and let me just add that when we look at items, we call them poorly performing items. It doesn't necessarily mean if everyone's getting them wrong. It also means if everyone's getting them right. So, we're looking at items, for example, a person who would fail the exam and get question number 3 right, and the person who passes the exam get question 3 wrong, we have an issue. So we look at those things and say, why are the people who know about the industry getting that question wrong? There must be something in the distractors that we're not measuring what we need to measure.
Yeah.
So we have those type of things as well. So we do our SMEs and TDLR, we do our due diligence to make sure we're putting out the best possible exam to measure that minimal competency person.
And again, this is Mark Lane, I don't want to cut Ray off, but I do think this is something that we may want to discuss in a future agenda item.
So we'll, if one of y'all make that motion to add it, in item H, we'll add it as a future, next one. Sounds good.
But I do want to make a point. We can have the discussion, but we do not want to discuss any content of the exam
Understood.
publicly.
Understood. Well, John, you owe Lorraine lunch. She wants to go to Whataburger.
That's it?
I can do that. Thank y'all very much.
You're welcome.
And with that, we'll go to the item E5, which is Regulatory Program Management Division, Public Outreach.
Good morning, members. My name is Russell Tolley. I'm the program specialist for the RPM division. I'm not sure if we had reorganized since the last time you guys met, and we were formerly known as the Compliance Division, and we've had a name change and reorganization. I'd like to introduce the new Assistant Director for this program. It's my boss, Charlotte Melder. She's an attorney with a long history here at TDLR. She was formerly with the Enforcement Division. So my presentation's brief. I just want to let you know what the RPM division does. We're sort of the interface to the agency for many times for PTC professionals who have particular questions about the law, the rules. They may offer suggestions for changes, need some clarification. They'll frequently come to us via phone calls or emails, and I respond to those. We're also available, RPM, for any professional meetings or seminars or anything else you'd like to invite us to. As part of our public outreach effort, we're available to answer questions, to give an overview of the program, and to assist you in any way we can. And I think that covers my presentation.
Russell, quick question. What conventions and conferences have y'all been able to go to or have been invited to?
We haven't been invited to any lately, so.
How does that make you feel?
Very lonely. No. We do participate in something that's tangentially related, and that's with the comptrollers and TADS meeting and PTADS meeting that we do semi-annually. In fact, I'm going to a meeting there today at 1 o'clock.
Do you also do an association with the property tax professionals on the assessment community as well? Are you the
Yes.
same group?
Same group, same person, me.
Yeah, gotcha.
Okay.
So you have a lot of fun there. Anybody else got anything?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with that, we'll move to E6, Executive Office, Recent Developments, Overview of TDLR's Strategic Plan for 19 through 23, and the overview of TDLR's legislative appropriations request for fiscal years 20 and 21, and I guess sunset would be in that same category as well, probably? Or discussion of sunsets? In the executive office portion?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, Nick Bowen, TDLR Chief of Staff. Thank you for being here today, and we appreciate your service. Wanted to give you a little rundown, summary of what's been happening around the agency since you guys last met in February. This summer, we did complete our strategic plan, and it's something that the legislature mandates all state agencies complete every 2 years. It's something we take very seriously. We hosted external sessions around the state in Arlington, El Paso, Houston, McAllen, and in Austin. We conducted internal sessions with our staffs, and we also made available for folks who could not come to sessions to participate off our website and our Facebook page. These sessions were an opportunity for everyone to kind of come and share ideas and opinions on how we're doing and how we can improve. The final report was completed over the summer and has been submitted to the Office of the Governor and the Legislative Budget Board. It is available for viewing at tdlr.texas.gov. Following that, our staff went to work on our legislative appropriations request, and that report was completed and submitted to the Governor's Office and the LBB, and it too is available for viewing on our website. Our Executive Director, Brian Francis, and staff have participated in some interim legislative hearings. Just July, TDLR presented at a joint hearing of the House Committee on Licensing and Administrative Procedures and the House Committee on Business and Industry. We most recently testified at a joint hearing of the Governor's Budget Office and the LBB, as well as hearings of the Senate Business and Commerce Committee and the House Natural Resources Committee. We appeared as a resource witness at a recent hearing of the Senate Criminal Justice Committee, in addition to attending the most recent hearing of the Sunset Advisory Commission. All this is in preparation of the next legislative session come January. It'll be here before we know it. Also wanted to touch on some outreach, including your website, and update you on some traffic numbers associated with your site. Over the past 6 months, the Property Tax Consultant's website had 12,428 page views. That's an average of 68 per day. 70% of those visitors accessed your site from a desktop, compared to 30% from a mobile device. The top reasons for visiting your site are the pre-license education list, frequently asked questions, exam information, forms, and continuing education information. Also wanted to remind you of our social media presence. Our Facebook and Twitter accounts are really gearing up, so please check those to keep up with TDLR news and events. Your group also has a list of about 6,000 or more than 6,000 subscribers that receive various email blasts pertaining to the program. And if folks are not receiving those, they can just go to the website and subscribe and begin receiving those immediately. That's the conclusion of my report. Glad to answer any questions.
Paul Pennington, I have a
Yes,
question. On the TDLR strategic plan for fiscal years 2019, 2023, did that get into the whole issue of us and the property tax professionals staying under the umbrella of TDLR at all?
Mary Winston, TDLR. No.
Are we staying under the umbrella?
Thus far, you know, Mr. Pennington, I love when our boards and councils come in, and you guys don't come in often, but you're so engaged when you do, and I appreciate it. Because we have a lot of meetings, and sometimes we may feel like we're boring someone, you know, with the facts that we have to present. This is not one of those meetings. As you know, that's not our call. So as far as we know, we are remaining with these programs, or they're remaining with us.
Okay.
The legislative session comes up, and they tell us what to do, and we say, yes, of course we will.
This is Bill Green. If anyone, well, Paul, you may have seen it, or maybe you haven't seen the review of Trek and TALCBs, where they wanted to bring us in. They brought up that possibility. They didn't have a real good review. I didn't think, and I don't think they have room for us at this point. It was pretty clear that we're not going over there.
As far as we know, you all are remaining here. There is a lot of information, yes, and different reports that are out there and we can review, but as far as we know, we are staying status quo. To Mr. Chairman's comment concerning Sunset, our review is coming up 2020, 2021. So that's gonna be within that time frame. So with the session coming, with that review coming, we have a lot of work that we'll be doing.
Good.
This is Ken Parsons. I will say that a couple of us on this council appeared at the meeting you had a few months ago and made it very clear what our position was as far as staying under the TDLR with regard to our profession. And I think the people at the meeting that were members of this group made it very clear that our preference was to stay with TDLR, sort of. We've established now some credibility with you guys, and we feel like if it's not broke, it shouldn't be fixed. And we like being here, so we made that pretty clear during that meeting. So,
Ken, I'd like to echo that as well, and I appreciate y'all coming and attending that, those that did go, and then certainly me personally, my feelings as well. Nick and Mary, thank you very much for that. I'm going to make a suggestion that we move F and G together, group them together for the sake of time and redundancy there. So we move to item F and G, and there was plenty of discussion and fodder back and forth in this, and it was a very productive day, I thought, and I want to thank Deborah and Mitchell for volunteering for that. Wasn't a whole lot of brain damage, and then also the staff, legal staff, for taking the granular look at it, Mark, and your efforts towards that. We really do appreciate it. And with that, I'll.
Thank you, members. For the record, Mark Gladney, General Counsel's Office. This particular agenda item, well, F and G are basically together, so we're going to be talking about discussion and possible recommendation regarding the rule amendments to Chapter 66, specifically 66.10, 66.20, 66.21, 66.25, 66.70, and 66.80. Okay, as was recently discussed, we did have a rules work group meet on August 16th to review Chapter 66 of the PTC rules and Occupations Code, Chapter 1152. The proposed amendments before you are the result of the work of that group, and I'm going to go through each amended proposed section and invite comment on them. So starting with 66.10, basically 66.10 was a update or correction on the language under Section 2 for private provider. The definition there remains the same, except for we deleted the as defined by Texas Occupations Code, Chapter 1152, since there is no such definition in Occupations Code, Chapter 1152. Are there any questions or comments on that particular section? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to the next one. That would be 66.20. All that was done in that particular section is under subsections B and C. We simply wrote out the word percent instead of using the symbol. Any questions or comments on that? Okay. Hearing none, moving on to 66.21. Boy, I hope you guys are going to keep it this simple.
Well, I can promise you that won't happen.
Great. On the 66.21, the only change was made in E. Each educational program or course shall be reviewed in even numbered years as opposed to annually. And I believe that we just had a real brief discussion about that. So are there any questions or comments on that?
So this is Deborah Balcom. Basically, advisory members, we decided, since legislature meets every odd year, we really only need to update our education. For the most part, appraisal theories don't change too much. Appraisal concepts don't change too much, but the law changes, and we need to update it as law changes, but not necessarily annually. Just a little bit easier for our education providers to update. That's what that recommendation was for.
Paul Pennington. My question is, the legislature met in 15, 17, and gonna meet in 19. So doesn't it make sense for the review of the educational program to take place after? Let me just clarify. Is the review of the educational program, is that when we get together and review exam questions, or am I totally off base on that?
No, this was when the providers have to submit their education materials that they're teaching for approval
To
from
TDLR.
TDLR. So right now, every year, education providers have to
Well,
provide their education material to be approved. And what we're saying is extend that to 2 years.
Yeah, but let me ask you a question. If the legislature in 17, it's the educational material, so the educational material, you're saying we update it in even years, and that, what about people who take those courses and they take the exam in that fall of the odd year? You're saying there are, and this is kind of a testing question that I think I'm going to answer my own question. There would be no questions on the exam that would deal with legislative changes in the odd year. We might meet as the test group, but those changes wouldn't go on to the exam until the even year. Is that right?
Well,
If that's the case,
That's my
then it's
understanding.
fine. Yeah.
Yeah, because like the legislation happens and it's enacted like September 1 typically.
No, or January 1.
Well, yeah, September, January, and then that would be the following year, the odd year that they met.
Is that, did I answer my own question?
Yes.
Okay.
Usually we do not stop the exam and halt it based on changes happening in the session. As you know, we continue moving on, and then we'll say the new exam, if it's a big impact, will begin on such date as the SMEs will determine.
Okay.
And so we'll make those changes and say, starting here, this is how we're going to do this. Because they're going to have to be a line in the sand. We're just not going to catch somebody by surprise, because our intent is not to specifically fail somebody. The intent is, are you competent?
Right.
So we're going to draw that line based on what they've been learning. So we'll make that announcement on when that change is going to be in the candidate information bulletin with time.
So, in the case of, just as an example, TAP would submit their educational material, say in January of 20, right? After the session. Is that what you had in
Correct.
mind?
Yes, correct.
Okay, and
That's-
then.
For CE approval?
Yes.
Is what you're
for
talking?
CE
Okay.
And then the test group will have developed questions in the fall of 19 that won't be put on the test till sometime in 20. Okay, I'm good.
That's the intent.
I'm good.
We did discuss that in our last, Ken Parsons, we did discuss that in our last meeting, and I think, Paul, it was right after you left, about what is the cutoff date, and when do these new changes go into the exam? And I remember something around March of the following year that we said that will
Okay.
be when the new questions, so.
I got no problem.
Yeah.
Mary Winston, TDLR, and I just want to, we've given our director of E&E a little workout this morning, but he's up for it. There's no gotcha. There's no gotcha. There's a whole science to examinations that us regular folk don't even think about. But the statistics, the different questions, so forth and so on, and the timeliness that this work group gets together and the SMEs to decide how we're going to test. There's no gotcha. That wouldn't serve this profession well, wouldn't serve the public well. So as Ray is trying to give us little hints into that science of the examination, I just want to reinforce that there is no gotcha. We really do. The scores are the scores, you know.
No, and I think, this is Deborah Bachman, I think we appreciate that, and we understand that. I think it's more, we want to make sure that our education providers are aware of what the rules are so they know how better to educate the population.
Yes.
And I think that's what we're just making sure we clarify.
Yes.
So, and yeah, I mean, we're perfectly on board.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Ray.
And this is Mark Lightning. When we were doing the work group, we didn't get that granular as Ray, did, in the review process. The main intent here was to be responsive to any changes that the legislature may make during their meeting the odd-numbered year. So.
Okay. Mark, before we move on too much, Paul and Ken, as legacy veteran guys in this industry, really appreciate you guys serving in that capacity on the exams and they care about our business and our industry and the integrity of it all, and just really appreciate y'all spending the time and the effort and all the brain damage that comes with that. So just wanted to say thank you.
We'd like to say you're welcome, and it's a joy to be old.
Well, thank you very much.
All righty. Now moving on to 66.25, under continuing education. The main changes that we made were in subsection B. We'll start there. Basically, the change was with regard to renewing the registration. The renewing registrant would complete 24 hours of continuing education in courses approved or recognized by the department instead of 12. And then we broke it down in the subsections B1 through 4, and we increased the number of hours for CE over that 2-year period. In B1, we increased it from 3 to 6 hours of instruction in Texas state law and rules that regulate the conduct of registrants. In B2, we increased from 1 to 2 hours in ethics. B3, we increased from 4 to 8 hours instruction in appraisal. And in B4, we increased from 4 hours to 8 hours in instruction on property tax consulting. And in subsection C, we just basically stated that for a late renewal, the CE hours would have to be completed within a 2-year period immediately prior to the date of renewal. So we do have some other changes, but I'm going to wait and see if y'all have any questions or comments on subsections, subsection B and C.
Sure. So this is Deborah Bachman. Could I clarify just a little bit for the council members? One thing we discovered in reviewing the rules is that a long time ago, we used to renew our license every 2 years, remember?
Right.
And then the law changed, or so we thought it did, to license every year. In reality, when you read it, we found that there was a law that changed it to every year, and then another law enacted right after that didn't change it. And so we've theoretically been doing it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And so we still are on an every 2-year cycle, technically in the law, even though we've been operating on a 1-year renewal cycle.
Can I,
So,
Paul Pennington, can I ask a question of Deborah? So, as if TapTap is a provider of these courses,
Right.
I guess, let me rephrase it. If you go to the TapTap conference and you get your 12, you've already licensed,
Right.
then the next year you get your 12, that's your 24, right? So it doesn't have any impact on somebody seeking a license, right?
we're not asking for more hours in a 2-year period than we're currently asking for. It's a matter of if people are going to be diligent enough to do 12 hours one year and then 12 hours the next year at the conference setting that TapTap offers,
Yeah.
or CEU conference setting for a
Okay.
12-hour course. But human nature may be that they only want to stack up all those 24 hours in 1 year. And so that could have impact on some of our CEU providers in that case. And so really, we're not asking for more hours. I thought we did rearrange
we did
what
too.
some of the hours were. One of our recommendations to rearrange what some of them were.
Well, and we did, but then what we discovered was from checking with the providers that was going to impose additional costs on them, and that would have really complicated the real process entirely. So we thought it was more prudent to just simply double everything, and then there wouldn't be any additional costs on those providers.
So, Ken Parsons, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going there. Does that mean every 2 years now, we register with the TDLR, or we have to,
Under 1152.201, the initial registration would be for 1 year. Okay. Under renewals would be for 2 years.
okay, let me understand what you said. The first time you register is only good for 1 year?
Yes, that's what the statute says. The initial registration would be for 1 year.
And then after that, if you.
Renewals
renew
would be 2 years.
After 12 months, then you're good for 24 months.
Right.
As long as you get the CEUs within that 24-month period.
Yes.
Okay, and then maybe we're going to fees, but right now, what is the fee, $75?
75.
Okay, and then you're going to, I saw 135 or something in there?
Yes. And we'll be
That's
getting.
not double.
That's not double, no.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'll be getting to that and explaining to you
okay.
why it's not double.
Okay, but the point is, we have to now register or update our license every 2 years
For renewal.
just for renewal. I understand.
And when will that, this Deborah Balcom, when will that go into effect? At the same time these rules go into effect?
Yes.
If we approve that, I mean, and if we want to maintain an annual registration, that would actually, at this point, need to be a legislative change? Now that we've discovered what the real rules are?
It was already a rule.
It's already, it's already, there's already in statute as far as what the 2 years for renewal, it's already here.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it was one of the more junior attorneys that spotted it, if I'm not mistaken.
It would be awesome.
As well.
But I think what happened at the work group, I was working off of the state website for the
Right,
statutes,
exactly.
and then we were working off of the TDLR ones, and there was a slight difference between the two,
Yep.
and then that's when we discovered that there were two competing bills, and the one bill that was passed a day later
Yep.
was the 2-year
Yep.
anniversary on the renewals. So we went with the later enacted statute.
Right. So this
bill.
is Deborah Balcom again. My question here and my concern is that we are currently operating under this 1-year policy. I think, is TDLR telling us we're gonna have to go to 2 years, because that's technically what's in the law? And if so, then the 24 hours makes sense, right? Because that requires the same amount of education. But I do worry about our education providers, because we're pretty much involved with a major one, that would dramatically impact their attendance every other year. I do worry about that.
But you have the same amount of hours that's required.
Correct.
So instead of 12, you have to have 24. I don't know. I'm not sure that would happen.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the licensees are gonna just have to take some ownership of that.
Right. Oh, and I agree with that.
You know,
So-
and, of course, I'm not a provider, so I
Yeah.
can't say that very easily. But, I would see how that would be a concern, but it'll work itself out.
I would suspect, Ken Parton, it would be business as usual for the providers, because, like you said, you can either take 24 in 1 year, or you can take 12 and 12 and 12, which I suspect is what people will do, most of the people.
And then this is Mark Gladney. I mean, we had, the feedback that we had gotten was that by doubling it, it was less of a burden on them than if we were to keep them the original way that the work group had them.
Right.
I guess Lorraine's come up
There's
here to.
one caveat in
Yeah.
that is they can't take the same course twice.
That is
24
correct.
months.
That's a point I wanted to make,
Yeah.
which could become an issue depending on what time a course is approved and what time a person is renewing their license. There is a possibility that this is going to affect our CE providers because it is possible they may need to offer more courses to be able to have enough available for those having to renew, especially if they save those 24 hours to the end. And so this was something that was brought up that I am concerned about because that will be a cost for every course that they have to have approved. And as you know, we only have 21 providers. And out of those 21, we've already lost several of those that are not offering courses at this time.
Paul Pennington, I have a question. If you're a licensed property tax consultant or a senior property tax consultant or others, lawyers, whatever. So if you go to a conference in 2019 and you go to a conference in 2020 and they allow 12 hours per conference, you would be covered, right?
If the course is approved by the department.
Well, that's what, okay. Forever, they've had this Texas A&M legal seminar, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And it's my understanding this was the first year that A&M wasn't, actively involved in it, but it was the same program.
Right.
So are you saying that those people, whoever runs that, would need to submit to you that the 2019 program is this, and you have to approve it, and then if TapTap, another provider, says, here's our conference this year, you have to approve it, don't they, just the fact that it's another year, doesn't that don't they change their material?
They do. A course
Right.
is only good for 1 year.
Right.
So most of them will change their material to update with codes. You also have to look at that breakdown that Mark was giving you in each of those, and to renew your license, you have to have that breakdown exactly.
Well,
And some providers don't provide that full 12-hour course with all of those.
Right, I agree.
So you
Okay.
have to consider that as well.
But for those who have a license and they attend these conferences,
Mhm.
and the conference material changes each year, they should be good, I would assume.
Yeah, as long as they send in their stuff and we approve it, they would be fine, yes. I mean, they would have a course approved to offer to the licensees.
I think what'll occur, and I could be totally missing this, which is not uncommon, that you'll see when they offer a course, like say you have one session, you'll have 6 hours of Texas law and 2 hours of ethics, and then your next one will be 8 hours of instruction and then another 8 hours of tax consulting.
Well, to me,
Does that make sense?
to me, what it's saying is, I'll use TapTap.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to have a conference, your conference has to meet these guidelines of X number of hours for this and this
Right.
and this and this and this.
It doesn't have to have all 4 of those. The requirement is that you have to have that breakdown to renew your license.
Within that 24 months.
Yes, that breakdown is not required to have a course approved. To have a course approved, you do not have to have a full 12 hours with
No,
each of
but,
those. So I just want to make that clear.
As a practical matter, in most, not the realtors, because I have another license. The realtors, seems to me that I have to take a real course, just like a day course every.
Right.
Okay, but what I'm trying to get at is the Texas A&M people and the TapTap people, whoever the people are, they have to be cognizant that their conference, right, meets these.
The renewal requirements?
Yes.
TapTap always does, yeah. They send in their
Okay.
stuff with whatever the required breakdown
So-
is. I just want to make sure that's clear that they don't have to do
Right.
that.
So TAP offers, the entrance education seminars as well.
Mhm.
And they have the hours that meet the 40-hour entry requirements. And during that 40 hours, there's typically also an offer of 12 hours of CEU
So if you
education in
miss,
those.
if you miss a conference, you
Well-
could just go make your 24 up by attending the course.
Right. What
Okay.
I foresee happening, which,
But the
you know,
course has
is
to
not
change each
TDL
year.
Right. The course does change
Okay.
enough that I think it could be, a provider could change their material enough to make it be,
Yeah.
to make it be approved and not be the same course.
Right.
One thing I do foresee in changing this, though, is that what could happen is that registrants now decide to go to the A&M conference and get 12 of their hours, and then they go to TAP's conference and get 12 of their hours, so that ultimately they're only going to TAP's conference every other year, whereas now they go every year.
Right.
I don't.
But I would hope that, that's.
I don't think that's gonna be the case. I think
Okay.
if they go to A&M, they go to A&M, they just go the next year. If they go to TAP, they go to TAP that year and the next year, and they're covered. That's what I think.
Is the TAP conference gonna be 12 or 24 hours each year?
It'd be
The
12.
conference would still probably remain 12. The CEU's providers would have to decide what it needs to be, but I would imagine you're pretty stretched to get those 12 hours in 3 days, and people
Yeah.
don't take off more work than that, so the conferences tend to only be 2 or 3 days.
And counter to that, like, when the IPT symposium in November, I can get all of these except for my 6 hours of the Texas in one conference
But at the 12 or the 24?
at the 24.
Oh, really?
IPT has not been submitting as many courses as they did in the past, I will say.
But I think as a work group, we decided to respond this way simply because we realized in the law in the legislature that we're supposed to be renewing semi-annually.
I agree with what Steve said. From what I understand, this was the law the whole time. And so we're just telling everybody, hey, the law is this,
Right.
and it'll work itself out. You have to work it out.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it worked when it was 2 years before.
Yeah, yeah.
I really don't think it's gonna be a problem. But
Okay.
I might be surprised.
We probably do need to make a concerted effort to spread the news, though. I don't know if that's a TDLR task that you do with email or a mailer or what, but we need to inform them, all of our licensees, that this is the new rule.
Well, these rules, the purpose of today is to get your recommendation for publication. So these rules will be published once we get your blessing. And there will be a 30-day comment period. So they will be published in the Texas Register and for the whole world to see, and they can make whatever comments that they deem necessary
That
on
might be a
there.
good job for Russell, for his public outreach. Right.
Also, Mary Winston here. I'm looking at our Public Information Officer, T. Lamage, who is relatively new. I told her she's been here a whole month, so she's not new anymore. But she's leaning forward because that's part of what she does, is get that information out there. It's once, as Mark says, you all bless this to move forward. It's out there for additional comment. And that's 30 days. Then Mark comes back and says, hey, this is what everybody said in their comments. So those are those several bites of the apple that we sometimes talk about here. But Tila's here, and she's paying a lot of attention. And so we are going to hit this from TDLR's perspective a couple of different ways. And of course, everyone, well, a few actually, because this meeting is on YouTube. And whatever other information that you all provide, this update, yeah, it's not a done deal yet, but the comment period is coming up. And those out there who want to comment, we want them to have that opportunity.
And that will be at the next,
At the next meeting, we will take up any comments that we receive on this, and we'll act accordingly. We'll present them to y'all and make determinations as to whether or not we're going forward with those comments or leave the rule as it was published. Yeah. And then you'll make a recommendation to the commission to adopt the rule package.
So I have another question then. This is Deborah Buckham again. What is TDLR's plan to roll out the 2-year renewal versus the 1-year renewal. When will that begin? How does that look? Do we have direction on that, or is that another agenda item that we need to talk about later? Or another
That,
meeting?
I don't have a direct answer for it at this particular time on that. I'd have to go and check into that.
Ken
Because-
Parsons, does that have to do with the comments that are gonna be coming in once it gets posted, and then those comments are gonna be considered, and then you make the final decision that we're gonna make that change from 1 to 2 years?
No, the 2-year, this is statutory, so unless
So
the
it's in place
legislature
now?
were to make a change at the next session, this is what is the current law.
Well, and I guess that's what we're asking is when is I mean, because currently we're still renewing annually.
Mhm.
So when
When we flip the switch, I guess is the.
do we, yeah.
Right.
Well,
And
when
how do we
the.
tell folks?
Well, I mean, we could go from the effective date of the rules, we could do that, and, which would probably be sometime early next year.
Okay.
So, I don't want you to hold me to a particular month,
No, no, no.
but
I'm
maybe
just wondering if
February
we
or
need to
March,
talk
something
about
like
it,
that.
though.
When the rules become effective.
That's a suggestion. I would suggest that we do it before the beginning of Q2 2019, because that's, everybody will be in their tails and alligators in appeals, and they're not gonna wanna have to be worrying and concerned about whether they're lawful or not. So probably if we could make it to where it's before the end of March.
Mary Winston, again, TDLR, and actually Ray was just whispering in my ear. When it and thank you, Ray. When it becomes effective, of course, there are certain dates. So say we have those 30 days of comment, then we have to come back and bring you guys, how does Brian put it? Gender-free, generic and gender-free, when I say guys. But, Ms. Balcom? But, so there is a time frame that this has to go through the system, so to speak, to become effective, right? However, that effective date will not impact those who are currently licensed, because as Ray just reminded me, what will change is when you come up for renewal. So you're good, but when renewal comes up, this will have been effective from X date, which will be decided soon. It will affect you upon renewal. So you're good as long as you are active.
Okay.
That makes sense.
So if we renew in March, then we're gonna renew in March regardless. at this
Regardless.
point.
But it may be 3 years.
But it may be then you're not renewing until 2 years after
Yeah,
that,
right,
after you renew in March.
You go to the 2-year.
Okay, that makes sense.
rotation
Yes.
at that
Gotcha.
point.
As little heartburn as possible,
Sure.
that we can give the licensees is what we're working towards.
It eliminates the burden, Ken Parsons, of having to renew every year,
Mhm.
one. The only negative I see is that you guys aren't gonna get as much money. Which is a positive on this side, maybe, so.
We will have to give that whole, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but we have, I think, the history going back to the time that, about 1999 or 2000, and the amount of fees that we have reduced over that time period. We can't make money in this business, it's not what we're here for. We have to work with what we're given, and we appreciate it, and we try to make it work across our currently 39 programs. I'll get that number. We've reduced a very large number of fees during this time period. But the law is the law, and it's 2 years. And since we noticed, we're gonna make it work as best we can for the licensee, and we do all the gymnastics in the background to make it work. I mean, Mark's up here, he'll be back up here again. The licensee body and the public, whoever wants to comment, will comment. So there's more work for the council to do. But those timeframes are what we're required to do, the gymnastics we jump through legislatively, administratively. But for the licensee, when you renew, it may be for a new period. That's it.
I guess, Mr. Chairman, this is Paul Pennington. we then entertain a motion to accept the recommendations?
I don't think.
Well, we're not finished yet.
We have more.
We have more.
Well, I thought
These were the minor ones.
Now, as Mary was stating, and again, this is a tentative timetable, okay? Let's see, today is October 10th. If these rules get published, say, in the next week or two, let's just say 2 weeks, okay, so that would be 24th. Okay, the comment period would go from the date of publication in the register. So let's just say it's the end of this month, so 30 days from, you say the 31st, go to whatever. I guess that'd be December 1st, I guess. And then we would get the comments, if any, and then bring those back to you at a later meeting.
Yeah.
Right now, I believe that. We're possibly looking at a meeting in January. So if it all passes muster with this board, then, and you recommend adoption of the rules, then it would be at the next commission meeting after that January meeting. And I don't have any schedule on commission meetings past January. So, but if you're talking about March of 19, that's probably a doable timetable for
And
this.
that's purely just me. I mean, they may want to extend it past that. I mean, that's just my own thing.
Well, once it's published, we got a 6-month clock running. We have to have official action on the rule package. So, so it has to be done within that period of time. Okay.
Can I ask a question about 6670?
Oh, we're getting there.
Oh.
We're getting there.
Mark, I just want to put this in a bow since I did mention the fee reduction. Between 2007 and 2017, thanks to Eric Beverly, he provided that for me, TDLR has reduced fees in the amount of $16.1 million. So we love to do that. So obviously, so don't worry about that. We're worried about you guys. So, okay.
And
Sorry,
so,
Mark.
do the people at the Capitol. They like that too. Now, after all this, we are still on 66.25. We haven't finished yet. Okay. I had to remind myself that. Okay, so we did B in subsections B and C. So we're going to go to D, and basically the change there is just basically that a registrant may not receive continuing education credit for attending the same course more than once during that 24-month period. Okay. Are there any questions or comments on that? I believe we just discussed that. Okay. Hearing none, moving on to subsection E. Registrant shall retain a copy of the certificate of completion for a course for 2 years after the date of completion. Any comments or questions on that? Okay, I like that. Okay, and then we deleted subsections H and I as they were not basically applicable at this point. So we deleted those particular sections. Okay, any questions on those? Okay, then we are finished with 66.25 and we are moving on to 66.70. The only change in that section was in subsection D, and we replaced the words of property that is not real to just personal property. Any questions or comments?
Yeah. Does this only apply to the 16 that have the real? It's just for those that have that different type of license that are in the real estate community, real estate brokers?
It cites that particular section, and apparently there's only 5 individuals in the state that meet 1152.158. Yeah, so, okay. All righty, moving on to 66.80, fees, which seems to be people's favorite topic right now. Okay, we made a change to subsection E, reduce, basically changing the renewal fee from $75 to $135. There was some talk about possibly doubling it, but as Mary had mentioned, under Occupations Code 51.202, we are revenue neutral. You know, so we can only take in the amount of money that's necessary to run the program. So after the number crunchers, who were definitely not me, got their hands on this, they had determined that 135 and the revenue that the agency receives from that would cover the operations of the program. So that's why it's 135 and not 150. So yeah, that should make y'all happy. Any questions or comments on that? Okay. We made a change to subsection H, basically changing that, removing the words non-refundable application fee for recognition as a private provider to 0. The reason for that was basically that apparently the private providers are not currently paying a fee under that. And it apparently wasn't in our system, so, and since there's only a small number of them, we just decided to keep it at 0. Any questions or comment on H? Okay. And then I, we just made the change that a private provider shall pay no annual fee. Yeah.
Now, can I make the motion?
Well, you're anxious today, aren't you?
Are you done, Mark?
Yes, I am done.
Mr. Pennington, do you have?
First of all, thank you, Mark,
Thank you.
for giving us the ins and outs of what we're about to do. I make a recommendation that we accept the recommendations for the proposed rule amendments to 16 Administrative Code, Chapter 66, 6.106, I'm sorry, 66.10, 66.2, 66.21, 66.25, 66.70, 66.80.
Motion made by Mr. Paul Pennington.
Pardon me,
leave
is that
anything
a
out?
motion for publication?
Sorry?
That's a motion to approve publication?
Yes, sir, it is.
Motion made by Mr. Paul Pennington. Do I entertain a second? I'll second. And seconded by Stephen Dunstan. And can we get a vote?
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
And it passes unanimously to be published.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Mark.
And also, before I leave, I'd like to thank the staff members as well as Ms. Balcom, Mr. Katine, and Mr. Mills for everything that they did in the work group. It was highly illuminating. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And with that, we'll move to item H, which is recommendations for agenda items for the next council meeting. I'm going to start with mine first, just to get it out of the way. Currently, I see that there are a number of options for online payment for other licensees, and I would like to see what we can do for our particular licensee to be also provided online payment options. Because I write maybe 2 checks a year, and going to get a cashier's check or something like that is kind of a pain in the rear. So any kind of online payment to pay these would be very beneficial, I think, to all of our members and licensees. And then is there anyone else that has, I think, Paul, you had one?
Thank you.
Yep.
I have
Deborah?
another one too.
Okay.
I'd like to discuss the ability to show on the website who the senior association is with regular property tax consultants. It's come up several times, and I don't think we have access to that. So, I just would sometimes like to know who their senior is and who they're associated with.
That's a great
So,
point.
I'd like to see if we can see that on the website maybe.
So show the senior sponsor?
Right,
Yep, okay.
senior affiliation or whatever.
That would bring some new, renewed accountability to the juniors, I guess, or probably juniors, probably not the appropriate. Yeah, yeah. And then I would certainly entertain that. If should I just make motions on adding these agenda items as we go at this point?
Mary Winston, yes, and motions aren't really even necessary at this point.
Okay.
Because actually, once we get the requested items at this meeting, you can call in, email preferably,
Okay.
and give additional items
Okay.
for consideration, so, yes.
Okay. Ready? Yes.
My motion for an agenda item in a future meeting would be that we look at that provision that allows people with the designation CMI to become licensed property tax consultants. And also, it's the question about attorneys as well. With the attorneys, if they wish to have employees, the legislature found fit that they would have to pass a senior property tax consulting exam. But I think if they just want to do a property tax appeal, I know they don't have to be licensed, which that's probably a moot point. You're never going to get anything passed that involves attorneys. But that CMI thing, that's a valid point, because they don't get training to attain that designation, which is specific to the state of Texas. So I don't know what the motion should be, but I'd just like us to take a look at, and I don't know if this is something that the TDLR can change the rule or if it takes legislation, I'm not sure. But I'd like to look at, they need to be required to have some Texas education before they are becoming property tax consultants.
Okay, Mr. Pennington, I think I've got you. I think more importantly, I understand what you're asking. On the attorney thing, pretty sure that's the law, so no, that's not, we can't change that. But you're right, the legislature in their wisdom did require attorneys who do this. If you have staff, if you have people working for you, you do have to get that senior designation. The CMIs, I think I know what you're talking about, what you're looking for, and we can begin to look at that for you. If not, I'll send you an email just to make sure. And again, we don't really need a motion for it. It's just an item that we can put on our next agenda.
Great, let me add on to that, and Paul, I did recall in Tennessee, as a CMI, it's reciprocal for licensing, but I am required to go to the State House and get Tennessee CEUs.
Okay.
For Tennessee. But I can still go before an administrative judge, and I'm licensed in Tennessee. So, Mary, you might look at what Tennessee requires.
Definitely.
Because if we just did a copy of that, it may work. I don't know, but great point, and great agenda item to discuss for sure.
And I have one additional one.
Okay.
I would like for us to be able to discuss or put on the agenda, to discuss how better to equip our education providers to better prepare our new licensees, without necessarily discussing the exam in particular or subject matter in particular. Maybe if there's any recommendations we can have to better equip our education providers. I don't know exactly what that looks like.
Is that so that
but-
the pass-fail
Right.
improves, or?
Or so that they're just better prepared to take that exam, yeah.
Well, this Paul Pennington, I cannot answer your question about people experiencing like extremely difficult math questions. I can say that in the past, there was a point in time where they merged the questions, the pool of questions were merged with the tax consultant questions with the property tax professional organization. And so then people started getting really strange questions because it came from the appraisal districts. And I thought, and Ken can correct me, I thought when we met in, I think it was the fall of 17, or whenever we met, I thought we had pretty well cleaned that out, and to take any kind of a CAD question that really doesn't pertain to this out of the pool. So if there is something like that, I mean, on the exam, there just aren't that many questions that require a calculator to begin with, you know, for entry level or for a senior. But I don't know how to answer the question, how the test being written, and how then we could tell the providers, you better start concentrating on whatever. I don't know. I mean, TDLR tells you there's going to be X number of questions on, you know, these sorts of things. So I don't know.
Maybe then it's moot.
I don't know.
Well, I
But
think
don't
that,
know.
Ray said it earlier, I think, and that is there's a minimum amount of competency somebody has to have to reach each one of those levels. And that's kind of what the direction we've worked under over all these years, so.
Ray Pizarro, Director of Education. Paul, to answer your question, if you guys recall, we do have a property tax professional, subject matter expert, sit on the property tax SME and vice versa, so that we can catch, as you were mentioning, these types of items. If it doesn't apply, we would remove that again, and vice versa. So we're doing that right now.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought.
Although I think we lost ours in our last meeting. The person that was sitting in from the professional side recused himself for some reason. I think he didn't like the 2-year, I can't remember what the reason was.
I wasn't present, so we will have to figure that out.
Anyway, I think we lost out on that, but yeah, I think that, and that's a good point, that, and I do believe what Paul said, that we try to separate, although we know that the laws are the same, the appraisal is the same, you know, basically there's a lot of things that overlap. So that was the whole point, I think, of getting us together and maybe merging some of those questions.
Yeah.
But I thought we were being pretty careful about not necessarily putting appraisal district questions into our database.
Right,
So-
right. And we do have, again, the candidate information bulletin that will tell everyone, the world, the content of what you need to know.
Right.
Because remember, we want to stay away from, we're not teaching to the exam, but the exam is a measurement of minimum competency. We're not the agency to teach anybody anything. You know, some people will ask us, well, I failed, I want to see the exam questions. No, we're not here to teach you. We're here to assess those folks, to draw that line of who should be licensed and who should not be licensed. That's our role. The educator is your role to teach them the technical side.
I'll say one last thing about that. It may be an agenda item for next time, but if you saw how the company out of California that runs that test, how they evaluate each question on that exam,
PSI, by the way.
PSI, how they evaluate every question, you could have A, B, C, D, and if not enough people answer D, then that's not a good distractor. Then we have to create a new distractor that ties more back to the question itself. And if everybody misses, say, a large percentage misses that particular question, then it's too hard, then they redo that. Then you have to redo the distractors or make the answer a little more clear so that people don't, if you know it, you get it.
Right.
Simple. And I think you said it a while ago, it's not a gotcha thing. You know,
Right.
if you know it, you should get it.
Right. We're not trying to trick anybody.
If you don't know it, you very likely won't get it.
That's
So-
correct.
Okay, then I withdraw. Fair enough. I understand.
And then did we have one other that you mentioned on the rollout time? But with the renewals, it's probably a moot discussion point because it's in flux when you renew. So just for clarity, so we have 3 agenda items for the next meeting at this point?
This is Mark Gladney. I think we're going to need to put another agenda item on there.
Okay.
You're coming due for open meetings training, so we'll put that on the agenda as well. And one last thing, in kind of keeping with some of Mr. Pennington's comments, and I think that the board needs to realize that under the government code, chapter 556, the state agencies have to be kind of careful about delving into legislative bill issues or seeming to influence legislative bill issues. So that's one of the reasons why we're kind of circumspect about those type of. If we start to sort of delve into that, we gotta be careful. So just kind of a reminder, because it kind of seemed like we were kind of edging that way.
So with Mark's item, Mary Winston, we are at 4
Okay.
agenda items. And again, if there are others, please contact advisory.boards@tdlr.texas.gov.
Mary, this is not, I'm sorry, go ahead, Deb.
Sorry, this is Deb Rockham. What's the status of our work group on the penalty matrix of our, aren't we putting that together as well?
So we need the
matrix group.
work group, okay.
Is that a work group on, this is Mark Liney for the record, is this a work group on enforcement issues?
It was the penalty matrix.
Oh,
on
okay.
The amounts, if I'm not mistaken.
Talk to Ms. Hurtado.
Okay, so that's it for the agenda items. This is merely a question, not actually an agenda item, and this may not be the appropriate time to ask it, but for the renewals of the members of this advisory board, we've had in the past where they would lapse, where they would fall off. Are we more ahead of that, where we don't have board members that are, their term has expired? And maybe a survey of who's still interested in serving. I know I'm certainly interested in still serving in my capacity, whatever that may be, wherever you want me to be. But you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
We've gone with
Yes.
half the members, all their terms expired, and
We are currently up to date.
okay.
Aside from that, you serve until you're replaced. But it is our intention to get everyone current. Currently, we are. We have a couple of members who are coming up within the next several months, and these openings we'll handle internally and, of course, be in contact. And that's a recommendation from our chairman to the commission votes to approve. That's the process. In the past, there have been times where that date has gone past, if it's meetings that didn't happen or what have you, but you do serve until you're replaced. Currently, we're good, and we hope to get everyone renewed and updated timely. Several of you have a few years still with us, but there are some that are coming up within a few months, and we want to make sure that's done before that does expire. But if not, on that off chance, we still want to see you here.
This is Mark Lanny. For the record, it would be Mr. Mills and Mr. Parsons whose terms are coming up in February.
Mark, when is my term up? Do you know when mine is?
2020.
Oh, you're here for at least another 10 years.
No, is it?
2020.
2020.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I'm certainly interested in continuing to serve in my capacity if it's so chosen.
Thank you for letting us know that.
Sure, hopefully Ken will as well.
I would.
But thanks for answering that question. You don't ever want to be a man without a country, right? And so the next is item I, discussion of date, time, and location of next council meeting. I know it will be here.
Right.
Correct.
Mr. Chairman, we were looking at 2 dates in January, January 16th, a Wednesday, and also Wednesday, January 23rd. Either one of those dates work for y'all.
Is it possible that y'all could shoot an email and we could check and get back to you, or you need
Sure.
to know right now?
Sure.
We don't need to know right now. Sometimes we poll the board at a later date. If typically we have a majority that says, okay, that date is great, then we will tentatively set the date. It's not carved in stone. We've had to change them in the past. Which it's up to the council.
Okay, so we'll just wait to get an email, and then we
Okay.
can respond appropriately and see what works with everybody's schedule. Is there anything else we want to bring forward before we adjourn? Appreciate everyone coming today. Thank you, staff, for all the great work. And it looks like it'll probably be next year before we see you. So thanks for a
Happy
great
New
year. And we'll see you next year. And with that, get a motion to adjourn our meeting
So moved.
at 11:40.